In this video, we're going through the form check subreddit, giving people advice on how they can improve their lifts. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first one I see. So K_Lane decided to switch from low bar to high bar ATG because I want my lifts to look nice. All right, let's see how things are looking. Really good stack. Good slow control technique, hitting that sticking point. Looks pretty fire, I gotta say. I can't really pinpoint anything I would change about it. We have a good ass to grass squat. All right, we have a deadlift form check from Zealous Ideal Story 212, 115 kg deadlift form check. Ooh. Okay. We're starting out in a lot of low back rounding. Is that necessarily bad? No, not inherently, but for most people, they actually can't pull strong through that. It's normally compensation that they're weak and they're not able to maintain good stability of their spine, not in the case of actually being able to pull a lift. So dude, you're pulling through your low back right here. This is all low back. We are bending so much through there instead of us really just getting down deeper and keeping a little bit more of a rigid core. So the main cue I would give you is get really good at pulling the slack out of the bar while maintaining a good stable spine. I would say especially starting out, you can have a little bit of rounding, but this is just way too much. Sorry about it, but we're ego lifting here. Your low back should be barking. Let's go to this one. Clown nose spice fish. That's hard to say, dude. Thoughts. Used Alan Thrall and Eugene Teo's bench press videos. Try to pin shoulders back on descent and allow them to naturally move with the press. And I think that's a great cue. I think for a lot of people, they just focus on pinning the shoulder blades back, almost back and down, and that's completely wrong too. But even just pinning them back in general or keeping them in one position, that's not how our shoulder blades actually function. If you keep them in one position the entire time, you are going to throw off the natural rhythm of your shoulder as we move. So I would not do that. This is a great cue. Allow them to naturally move as you press the weight up and allow them to naturally glide back and naturally retract as we bring our elbows down. The elbows are leading the motion, not so much our shoulder blades. So let's see how we're doing, brother. I would probably control the descent a little bit more. It still looks like your bar path is not consistent, and we want to try to make it as consistent as we can. So throwing in some pauses at the bottom, throwing in, just some tempo work can definitely help to clean this up a little bit more. But overall, the lift itself is not bad inherently. I can't really pinpoint anything else I would change about it, especially for more of a competition style lift where your main goal is just to push as much weight. You still just want to make sure that you have a good bar path, and you just want to make sure that you are basically lessening the range of motion, which is why brother has a big arc in his low back. Deadlift form check. Okay, this one has a good angle. Deadlift form check from Senku_140. Didn't really pull slack out of the bar or anything. This looks a little bit more like a RDL or something like that, where you're keeping your hips basically just back the entire time your knees are forward. It's kind of a weirder version of like a deadlift where you're just focused on keeping your hips high. So what I would say here, especially just to make it a little bit more deadlift-esque, is pushing your hips down a little bit more and actually pulling the slack out of the bar. I think that's one common theme I'm seeing here that a lot of guys aren't doing. You're basically just starting with your hips in that high position and then you're pulling up from there. So you are gonna be working a lot of your glutes still, but it just makes it a little bit more awkward. So to make this more of a deadlift, lower your hips a little bit more by pulling the slack out of the bar, and then go ahead and initiate your lift by extending your hips and your knees at the same time. Okay, let's find a different exercise, maybe not the big three lifts. Not that one either. From Super Duper 1530, how are the skull crushers? One common problem with skull crushers that I find, especially when you're using a fixed implement like a barbell, is you are normally having to modify your body around the bar versus you can move your body in a position that feels the best for you. So a lot of times when I'm doing a skull crusher, I prefer to use a dumbbell, cable, something similar to that, because we have more room to actually move. If we are kind of locked with my elbows and kind of wrists in this position the entire time, I have to move around the bar essentially. When we have to move around the bar, we can get in positions we don't find necessarily comfy, and then that makes it hard for us to give our all and make sure that we're actually feeling the muscle, make sure that we're pushing our muscles hard. Main thing I would say here is you could change the implement. If you're not having any issues though, I wouldn't really say to change it. Just going right off of what I'm seeing here, elbows are pretty wide. I mean, the grip is also wide here, just probably for comfort reason. Using an easy curl bar would definitely be beneficial here too, because you have more curves on the bar. You can kind of orient your hands however you want to, or at least a little better than you would on a barbell. But this looks really clean. You're keeping your shoulder, your elbow in basically the same position. You're just focused on the extension of the movement. Wouldn't really pinpoint anything else I would change about it. No big comments on that one. Just if you feel any kind of elbow, shoulder discomfort, you can opt for a different implement for weight. But if you're rocking with it, then keep on doing it. Only Scumbag. That's a nice name. Uneven bench. Let's take a little look-see. So the first thing I'm seeing is just the hands are pretty wide. When we're getting to that bottom position, it looks like our elbows are starting to, it looks like our hands are starting to kind of fall outside of our elbows, which can create some issues there in itself. It looks like you have two different elbow angles. This left side, you are more tucked in. Your right side, you are kind of more flared out with your elbow, and you're also wider on that right side. So what I would do to help set you up in the best position possible is use the knurling on the bars, find a certain point and use your finger as kind of a marker. So it really depends on kind of how wide you are. But for me, normally my pinky, that's not my pinky, my ring finger is normally the indicator for more of my lifts. And it really depends, right? If I'm going for more of a wider kind of press, I will go wider. If I want a little bit more of a closer press, I will go in with my hands. But you want to find that comfort zone to where you're able to produce kind of the same lift on both sides. If you find that one side of your bench is weaker, let's say your left side's weaker than your right side, that would be a good time to implement something like a dumbbell press, because then you're working unilaterally. You can work on single arm pressing movements to also help to work on getting stronger on both sides. I don't know if anything else I would change about this other than going in a little bit more with your hands. And then maybe trying just a dumbbell bench press and really just controlling the way down, focusing on keeping the same arm path for your lift. Or OK bar 24, lat pull down with the bench at maybe 10 to 20 degree angle. Yeah. Big common mistake I see with people who are doing lat pull downs. So we get to a certain point, right about there is where we start to basically cave the weight inwards. So when we're doing a lat pull down, we do want to focus on mainly pulling through our elbows. That's a big cue I give to all my clients, because if we pull through the hands, this is exactly what's going to happen. We're going to dump the hands underneath, and then we're trying to still kind of go back with our elbows, but then the weight isn't really helping us out there. Like, we're not really benefiting anything from pulling back this way since the resistance is going up. Long story short, what we need to do is we need to cut the range of motion a little bit. One of the times where going through a full range of motion is not going to be the most advantageous because you're losing the range of motion. You're basically taking tension away from your lats. So I would stop basically right about there. Focus on just pulling your elbow down to your back pocket. Once you get to that point, no dipping of the arm forward, no going into internal rotation or anything like that. You're just going to simply pull the elbow down, keeping the forearms kind of in line with that line of resistance, and then going back up. That's it. That's the only thing I would change here. This is a good one to wrap up with. Dr. NSQTR, my deadlift has always been 1 step forward, 2 steps back due to recurring low back injuries. Desperate for some advice to break the cycle. Let's see where we can help you out, dude. So from the side, nothing too crazy. I mean, once again, we can pull the slack a little better. We're still kind of lifting up our hips as we pull the bar, which just kind of tells me that we're not leveraging as much. We're not pulling the slack out of the bar. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse there, but pulling the slack out of the bar is a really important cue. We have a different angle here though. And so when we're trying to drive more internal rotation and basically pushing force into the ground, your legs are basically trying to turning out, push a little bit more on the outside of our foot, which we still want to make sure that we're able to generate force and basically get pronation of our foot. So what that means is we want to be able to drive more of the inside of our foot on the floor as we're pressing up, because that will allow us to generate the most force. We have a ground reaction force. So whatever force we put into the ground, the force will be then pushed back up into us. But if we're not getting pronation, we're more on the outside of our foot, we normally can't place weight through our joints appropriately. So the main thing I would say to help you out is go a little bit more conventional style. You can still go a little bit wider, but you definitely want to get those feet in closer. And then you really just want to focus on pulling the slack out of the bar. I think that's a big cue here, and actually generating the force through your legs. Another thing I would say here is definitely control the descent. Don't just drop the weight. If your goal is going to be for just lifting the most weight possible, then cool, like fucking do whatever. But if your goal is to actually get stronger in these lifts and make sure that your muscles are controlling you down, not just gravity helping you out, you want to go slow on that eccentric. You're also going to have a chance to load your glutes, load your low back, load your hamstrings through that lowering range of motion, and you'll get stronger at those lifts because they're in a less advantageous position. So the other thing I would say is definitely just get rid of these shoes, dude. Shoes like this do not belong in a leg day, really, for anyone. It's probably the worst thing you can do because you're not going to have good heel contact on the floor. You're going to feel like you're squatting on top of like a foam block or something, which would not make me feel very stable. If you got value out of what you just saw, let me know by leaving a comment or like if you're feeling generous. We have more videos like this on the way. Bye-bye.